Welcome to the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by TrainerRoad. We have Hannah Otto with us here today. Hannah, how's it going?
It's great. I'm happy to be back. We've had a little break.
Yep, yeah, we have. That's for sure. You're off season. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about, sometimes we see trends happen. This is a trend that lasts many, many years. We're going to talk about one of the biggest mistakes that kills fitness for people. We're going to get into that one with the questions that you've submitted. You can submit them down in the YouTube comments or on Spotify or at trainerroad.com/podcast. We'd love to hear from you guys wherever you contact us. It's awesome. Hannah, before we get into a question from Connor, I want to talk a little bit about the off season. Last year, you went and your off season was blended with also racing a gnarly stage race in Central America. That's not fully recuperative. And then I think that you got back to racing pretty quick. And I think we had this discussion where you were like, I think I want to take a more chill off season next year. And it seems like you've done that. And I want to ask you how you manage the psychology of that, because everybody listening to this is always afraid to take an off season because they're afraid they're going to lose their hard work and progress that they got throughout the on season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. The off season, I feel like year over year, I'm always learning. You know, you only get to do it once a year. And so sometimes it takes several years to learn lessons. And then by the time you learn the lessons, you're a new person. And so I really look at the off season as an opportunity to try new things. It's just like training. Let's see how this works. Let's see how that works. And the bottom line is you should finish the off season feeling recuperated. And so for me, that's meant a lot of different things over the years. Sometimes it means vacations. Sometimes it means traveling without a bike. Sometimes it means staying home and not traveling at all. Sometimes it means reconnecting with friends and actually being able to say yes after having the discipline of saying no for so many months. And so I think the physical and mental aspect of off season is really the critical piece that a lot of people miss, because you need both sides. Because when you start training again, at least for a professional athlete, it's full go. You have to be ready. And if you're not ready, the issue isn't what's going to happen in January, February, March, April. It's the fact that you could crack in June, July, August. And you can't quite pick up the pieces at that point because you can't take the time off then. You have to push through. And especially when we're talking about something like the Grand Prix, pushing through can look pretty ugly in those late months.
This is a good point. You pros deal with off seasons maybe a bit differently than a lot of us. Maybe it's the same if you're listening to this and you feel that you do have such a high level of discipline and it's nice to be able to disconnect from that for a little bit. I do think you need that mental reset, but it probably just operates at slightly different scales for a lot of us. I'm going to speak to the other athlete on the other side of the fence, Hannah, that feels like they don't want to take an off season because they feel fine and everything's good and they're ready to keep going. Specifically for you, Hannah, do you fear losing gains because of an off season, and how have you reconciled with that concern?
I think if someone says they don't, they're lying, because even though I know the science, even though I know the truth, you still do fear it. If nothing else, it's frustrating, right? Because you work all year to get to this level of fitness and then you intentionally lose some of it. It's very difficult to reconcile that. And that actually is the point, though. And so the biggest mistake that I see people make in the off season is trying to maintain fitness. And I see this through so many different sneaky avenues, not even cycling, right? It's, okay, we're going to take 2 weeks off. Now I'm a runner. What? What? No, we take the 2 weeks off trying to maintain that fitness through these different avenues. It's not helping you. If anything, it probably will end up hurting you. And so that's my personal rule during the off season is anything you're doing with the intention of maintaining fitness is a no. So can you go on a hike with friends and family? Yes. can you wake up early to do a core workout? No. This is where I set the line is it for fun and enjoyment, or is it for bettering your fitness level? And this is not the time for bettering the fitness level.
Yeah, sometimes it's a bit of a blurred line because it might fill your cup emotionally and psychologically, and it also is something active. Like, I could see some athletes like really wanting to get into more downhill gravity enduro style riding, and it's
Mhm.
on their bike, and they might be
Mhm.
doing some pedaling as a result, but it might just fill their cup. So there is maybe some gray areas for some of you athletes out there when you're hearing this where it might be tough. But I think Hannah's point is the one to keep in mind. If you're doing it because it's motivated by, I need to maintain fitness, then you need to take a break from that, whatever
Mhm.
that is.
Mhm.
If it happens to be something active, sure, let that be what it is. But the main thing is you need to make sure that it's filling the cup and allowing you to get a break from that constant pressure to maintain fitness.
Mhm. Mhm. You're not trying to start back up where you left off. If you're comparing anything, you're comparing, and I love the tool that TrainerRoad actually has for this, is the season comparison. You're trying to start higher than you started the year before. You're not trying to start where you finished the year. And that's a really critical thing to remember.
Yeah, very well said, Hannah. Very well said. Let's pivot into Connor's question that he has here. This one says, "Hi all, I do the vast majority of my training indoors using TrainerRoad. I found over the last year and a half or so that this has led to steady improvements in sustainable power and repeatability. Lately, though, it's felt like I've plateaued in my training and progress, more failed workouts, less progression. Could this be because I'm only riding 10 to 12 hours or 10 to 12 or so hours a week? Could it be because I'm not balancing my volume and intensity correctly? Should I try and incorporate different workout types? Is my AI FTP too high?" Lots of questions that they have. For background, I'm 26 years old, have a full-time and then some job, and have been using TrainerRoad for a few years, but have only really gotten to being very consistent in the last year and a half. Any insights or looking at my training data would be greatly appreciated, from Connor. So let's look at this athlete's training calendar to see what's been going on and see the plateauing that they're talking about. So if we see in 25, he started at 358 watts and he's at 3.98 watts per kilogram. And then if we fast forward to today, he's at 367 watts. He's at 4.15 watts per kilogram. So nice work. Power increase has been happening. And if you look, there's a lot of consistent training on here. If you can tell by looking, and if you aren't watching, you can watch on Spotify or YouTube. I would recommend it because then you can see what we're talking about here. It makes it easier. But if you see these dark green bars, dark green areas show that that's structured work. Whether it was inside or outside, that was structured, planned work that was part of their training plan. Anything light green is going to be something that was unstructured. So that might look like a group ride, race, or anything else that you've done. And this athlete does a lot of structure, which is really good to see. And in some cases where they have more unstructured work, sometimes it's because of races. But in most, or like group rides, is usually the most common thing that's there for that athlete. So the athlete has seen improvement. If you look at their 6-week rolling average training stress, they were around 500 and they're more or less around there, but they've lifted up to around 600. So that's actually a pretty significant 20% increase. Like, I know that we hear, if it's like in our minds, I don't know about you, Hannah, but us average athletes, if it's like less than 800, we're like, oh, we're just not good enough. We're not pro. But 5 to 600, and when you're looking at this consistent over time, being able to maintain that, that's a very significant increase.
It's solid.
Probably somewhere around 15 to 20%. Yeah. But one thing stands out to me immediately when I see this, Hannah, is there is from August all the way through here, there's like no weeks off at all. So more than a year. We're at a year and almost 4 months now. And there's not a single week off within that whole thing. So there's a red flag there. But this also operates at a different scale. I think one of the biggest problems is that we see that like recovery weeks themselves are just not respected. So I'm going to go back to May and we're going to look at this. In this case, what the athlete was prescribed is they are on a training plan where they're training 6 days a week. That's what the plan that's been laid out for them. And during the week, they're typically doing 90 minutes, then an hour and 15, then 90 minutes, then an hour and a half, then 90 minutes, and then it's 3 hours on Saturday. And it's usually 3 hours endurance is what they have. if you look at what they typically do on a Saturday, it's usually a hard ride, it seems like, because it's usually somewhere around 9 or like 0.85 to 0.9 IF for 2 hours. So it's pretty hard. And then after that, there's usually a much lower IF ride where it looks like they ride back from the group ride. And that's kind of like the separate thing that they do. And that's a common thing for this athlete. But here's the challenge. They don't miss that ride when they're doing recovery weeks. This recovery week that we see on May 5th to the 11th, on Saturday the 10th, they were just prescribed to have an hour and a half of easy, like low intensity, 0.65, like low IF, not hard endurance work. But instead, what they ended up doing in this case is they did nearly 3 hours, one ride at 0.84 and then again at 0.52. And it's not just 3 hours of like easy riding, it's 3 hours of proper riding that they're getting in there. So when you're doing that, this is so tricky because it's kind of like school's out for summer. And you can see like the profile of the ride. You can see that it's not an intentional endurance ride at all. It's a seesaw and looks like a buzzsaw. So Hannah, there's this temptation, I don't know if you've seen this with athletes too, where it's the school's out for summer thing, like senioritis almost, because we're so locked in and disciplined with not pushing hard during those recovery weeks. And then we get to the weekend and we're kind of like, it's basically next week already. Like, I'm really close. I've been good all week. I haven't blown myself up. And then and I'm super guilty of this too, by the way. And then what we end up doing is we just end up going crazy on a Saturday or Sunday or both. And then we make it so that we are going into the next week without actually getting the sort of rest and deload that we need. Have you seen this with athletes? How do you help them through it?
Yeah. So this is one of the most important things that I've learned with recovery days and recovery weeks. And this is why it's so hard to honor, is because you're not taking the rest because you're unable to do the work. You're taking the rest because you need it. And so this is an issue. And like you said, I fall into this too. But I think one of the issues is people think that they only need rest when they can no longer do the work. And so a lot of the time, it almost perpetuates itself because, for example, this athlete, I don't know this person, so I don't know for sure this is happening, but let's use it as an example, is it's a recovery week. You know you're not supposed to do this hard group ride, but you go out and do it anyway. You crush the group ride and you come home and you say, see, I didn't need the rest. I was ready to go. I was fresh. I crushed it. And so it perpetuates itself because now you're thinking, oh, it's fine. I only need 5 days recovery. I only need whatever it might be. But the issue isn't that day. The issue is how it bleeds into the next week, or even like you're saying, now you've plateaued. Well, you're probably not plateauing because you skipped your last recovery day or because you skipped your last recovery week. It's because of the load over time. And so it's really difficult sometimes to even point back to what it was because it's so far in the past. And I think, Jonathan, we've actually talked about this before on this podcast about, for example, the yellow days feature, right? Is like you have a yellow day and then you look at the next day and a lot of the time, like, you're still good. Maybe you're good on that yellow day. Maybe you're even good on a red day, but you scroll back and you're like, oh, I had this month period of a lot of yellow, red days and now I'm cracked. So it's what happens over time. And for me, I've had to rephrase rest in my mind to help this because I've learned this lesson the hard way, and yet it's still hard to do. And I think it's repurposing or rephrasing what rest is. So a lot of people see rest as a weakness, but really, I think you need to look at the flip side. What is the inability to rest? I think it's insecurity. And so I will say this phrase to myself, and other people, you can take this phrase if you'd like it. I'll be out on a ride. I'll be creeping up above the range or not wanting to honor my rest. And I'll say to myself, your insecurity is showing. And that will kind of put the brakes on, make me pause. Confidence is quiet. Confidence rests. Insecurity is what pushes you into that overtraining, overreaching, overdoing point.
It's a very good bit of advice that you just gave there, Hannah. For me, everything transformed with rest and recovery when I stopped putting, I should rephrase this. When I'm in my best moments with rest and recovery, the reason that I'm doing well with it is because I'm not taking or respecting my recovery workouts and staying low in my power range and hitting my low targets. I'm not doing that because I need it, like you said in the beginning. And what instead I tell myself is, you're creating space so you can do more. So the way I view it is I need to create room. I need to create more space. So then next week, and then when I'm in the second week and the third week of that loading phase, I can do even more than I did before. The whole point of training is progressive overload. And progressive overload operates at a lot of different scales, but maybe the most important one is that at the end of a loading cycle, most training plans are probably going to follow 3 weeks of loading where it builds incrementally, and then 1 week of deloading. And then after that 1 week of deloading, your next week where you start is probably going to be somewhere around the second week of your last loading phase. And then by the time you finish that next loading phase and then you do your deload week, again, the first week of that loading phase is probably going to be around the midpoint of the last loading phase. If you aren't respecting your recovery weeks and you're going out and you're doing extra during those recovery weeks, or you're not sticking to your power targets, you will not be able to start at that midpoint and or continue to ascend from that. Instead, you might start at that midpoint, and then the third week, you'll also be stuck at that midpoint. Because here's another thing that athletes don't recognize often, and I'm adding myself into this. Just because you did the workout doesn't mean that you will actually get the maximum amount of adaptation from the training you did. You can hit the numbers, you can check the boxes, but if your cup is so full, your body will not be able to adapt at the maximal rate and change and get stronger at the rate that it should if you don't have enough space for your body to be able to perform and recover. So it's all about carving out space. It's like negative space. It's breathing room. It's giving all of your training a place so that things can rearrange. Your body can move around the infrastructure and remodel inside to be able to build up. And if you have too much stuff packed in there all the time, it really can't happen. And you brought up the yellow days. I'm going to run through some other weeks, but if you see a yellow day on a Sunday, like we see here on the 11th for this athlete, if you see a yellow day at the end of your recovery week, you did it wrong. You should not have a yellow or red day at the end of your recovery week or even during. Now, in some cases, you might see it in the very beginning of your recovery week because you went really hard the week before. But you don't want to see it midway through and definitely not in the latter half. If we go ahead and we scroll down and we look at June 2nd through 7th, another example, easy recovery week, but then too much on that weekend, we get another yellow day. If we go ahead, though, there's a week that we can look at, June 30th to July 6th, I believe. So let me scroll back here. I went too far ahead. Another example where you went on Friday, you did this 3-hour and 45-minute ride, 190 TSS. You kept the power lower on that one, but that's a big day. And then after that, then on Saturday, you still went out and did a 2-hour ride. And that was on a yellow day in and of itself there too. So you kept it easier on those days, but that's a lot of volume. And if we just look at it from an overall hours perspective, the prior week, which would have been the end of your loading phase, you were at 12 hours and 48 minutes. And then the next week, you were at 12 hours, 11 hours and 59 minutes. That's not enough of a delta. So it's not all strictly based on hours and you need to see an X% reduction in hours, but it's a good systems check for you to see I spent too much time on my bike adding things in rather than creating space. So that's something that you can look for. Let's go to August 4th through 10th, though, for this athlete. This is a great week. Really good week. So if we look at, again, using the hour test, the prior week you were at 10 hours, and then this week you were down at 8 hours. That's much better. We see a more noted reduction right there. It's about a 20% reduction. That's great. Now, again, part of this looks like because you were on vacation in a different place, so maybe it interfered and made it a little easy. But the point is, this was much better. let's look at the intensity factors for your ride too. The first ride you had was you stuck perfectly to your power targets. It was 0.73, then 0.68, then 0.68, then 0.67, and 0.68. And you only rode 5 days that week instead of riding 6 or 7, which is great. So like, really good job. That's awesome. That's good to see. If we look at October, let's go all the way up to October 13th through 19th. And this is another example where you did skip one day on Thursday, which again, I don't advise ever skipping the scheduled workouts. Just do the scheduled workouts. Just do them as they're scheduled. Then you won't have to worry about extra space. But then again, you did the ride on Saturdays. Now, this may be a really important ride for you, and you never want to miss it on Saturdays. I would strongly suggest you're okay with missing that ride on recovery weeks. It'll be fine. If you need to have somebody to like lead the ride or something, put that in place. But recovery weeks are not the time to go out and do bigger rides at 0.9 IF for 2 hours. So it's just not the time for it. And then the last week I want to look at here is November 10th through 16th. This is just a recent one that you did. Bravo. You did fantastic. You stuck to the like everything. You didn't add anything extra in. The week prior, you were at 12 hours and 30 minutes. That week, you were at 7 hours and 30 minutes. Like, that is great. You did a really good job. Do that week when you have recovery weeks, and it will just help you so much. So, Hannah, in general, we've talked about this intra-week recovery that you need to make, which also looks like respecting the easy days when it's easy, which this athlete actually does a pretty good job of doing generally. But it also operates at a much bigger scale. And going back to this TSS chart, does this cause you concern to not see like a significant bit of time off from August of 2024 all the way through now we're nearly to December 2025? No, there's no weeks off.
Absolutely. Your chart needs to have a rise and a fall. I mean, you're saying you've plateaued. Look at your weeks. It is just one big plateau. There isn't a huge build and then a decompression. It kind of makes sense. It's along the lines. And I'm guessing that based on the way this person wrote the question of putting in, so many things, could it be because I'm only riding 10 to 12 hours? Could it be I need different workout types? All these different things, which I validate you. We all go down this wormhole when things aren't going the way we want. But I feel like based on the way you wrote this, I know you. And I know that this probably isn't the answer to the question that you wanted. You probably wanted to hear work harder. You need these type of workouts, double your volume. Like these are probably the things you were secretly hoping for. And so I want to challenge you instead of just seeing this as us sitting here saying, do less, recover more, which I'm just picturing you listening to this podcast like slouching, like, no, you're taking away my riding as we're talking. Instead, I challenge you. I dare you, take this recovery week, and instead of just seeing it as, oh, I'm taking a recovery week, challenge yourself to be better that next week. Then, like, replace that desire with an added challenge. Because again, and Jonathan, maybe you can confirm this, but I'm guessing you're doing these recovery weeks and then you're coming back the next week and you're still hitting the workouts and your brain is thinking, see, I'm achieving the workouts. See, I'm fine. See, I can do it. But what if that's because you're not achieving your potential? I'm almost certain it is. So what if those workouts could be 10 watts higher? What if they could be 15 watts higher? Challenge yourself to achieve that. Take the true recovery that you need. Take the off season that Jonathan is hinting at that you need. Then come back, build back up, and challenge yourself to be 10, 15 watts higher. I bet you can do it.
Oh, I completely agree. And Hannah, it's worth every athlete asking the question, what can I do to allow myself to perform at a higher level on the hardest days that I have in my training plan?
Yes.
Like, what can I do to create that space? Because that's when you can send the strongest signal. So much of training is about that strong signal. So then it's strong enough so that your body says, okay, I need to get stronger so that signal isn't as profound next time, isn't such a huge delta going from where I'm at to where I need to be. And if you can look at your training, and this happens, like even, you marked down poor sleep on November 21st is the reason for a struggled workout, but the yellow days get a bit more frequent, and we see them come into your training in the failed workouts. They increase from August of last year to now. They've increased, and I think it's really because this fatigue is really sneaky. It builds up over time, and before you know it, you're months and months into training at a consistent volume. And before you even realize it, your hard workouts aren't hard enough. And the reason they aren't hard enough is because you haven't carved out any space for your body to recover and prepare to do a bit of extra work. And then when you do that over time, there's this layering of fatigue that exists that just makes you feel like, why am I failing my workouts? Why am I plateaued? Then that's when everything starts to just suck in life and you get really fatigued, and then that's how burnout hits. So I think this athlete lives in the Los Angeles area, so I don't blame you for wanting to ride your bike outside every day. It's probably beautiful and amazing and awesome, and there's such good riding in that city. But in the end, if you want to get faster, you have to carve out space. You have to have downtime. And if you don't, and that goes on week to week, and then it also goes on season to season and phase to phase, operates at different scales. But if you don't have downtime, you're going to burn really hot, and then you're going to be this person that is kind of like, yeah, I used to cycle a bunch, but it's just not for me anymore. You'll get to the point where you dislike it enough to just not even do it. So give yourself the time. Respect recovery weeks. This is probably the biggest mistake that I see, and respect rest days. It's probably the biggest and most common mistake I see when I look at athletes' calendars, and we look at a lot of them. So if you can avoid it, you'll get faster. Jason sends in a question, says, hey coaches, I'm getting back into cycling after a long hiatus and looking for a big goal event for 2026. I know many have lotteries, so I may not get in, but what big events would you suggest and why? I have a specialized Crux and Epic World Cup as well as a Canyon Air Road, and I have plenty of bike skill from years of racing BMX and road as a kid. So any and all events are on the table. Which events have the best courses, support, ambiance, locations, culture, etc.? Hope to see you all at the races. I think that we have the perfect person to answer that one, Hannah. This is your job. You've raced also not just the standard races, but you've raced around the world. You've done some really cool, crazy ones. So what would you suggest for this athlete?
Yeah, this is definitely super important to me, even as a professional athlete. I have my core list of races that I always do where I'm seeking the highest level of competition. But every year, I always give myself several just races that I want to do because I love them. And I always try and incorporate at least one or two brand new ones too. So yeah, I definitely think that this is right up my alley of ideas. Based on the fact that you have good skills, it looks like you have a good mountain bike. I immediately go to, you should do something like Breck Epic, BC bike race. I mean, those are some of the best weeks I've had on a bike. If you have the time and the bandwidth for something like that, that's going to be huge bang for your buck in terms of excitement. Something a little less all-encompassing, Downieville or Whiskey 50, that's a weekend event. But you're saying ambiance, you're saying location, support. Those are excellent events. They're also, very famous in the cycling community. So being able to say, oh, I've done that race, it's a bucket list event. And then if you want to, put the gravel bike to use, looking at something like the big Little Sugar Double, spend one whole week in Bentonville, hang out in the community, the location, the culture in that aspect. I think you're going to get a lot of what you're looking for. You can spend the whole week riding, but honoring the recovery in between, of course. But
Yes.
seriously, just riding with friends, recovery, easy rides, but, being a part of the community, going around the expo, hanging out with brands, meeting the athletes. I think that whole week has really turned into an excellent hangout space for the whole cycling community.
It's really fun. That's a great recommendation.
What do you think,
I think
Jonathan? I feel like I
yeah.
left out plenty intentionally, wondering which ones you would throw in.
Yeah. It's extremely expensive, but so far the peak race I've ever done obviously is Cape Epic. It is the organization of how they run their events is just astounding. It's very good. So that Epic series is very good, and I would recommend any of those. My bucket list one is Swiss Epic. I would love to do that one someday. I'm gonna hit the lottery, and we'll make it happen. Maybe then. So, but that's like one of the bucket list ones that I have. Aside from that, in terms of, I'm going to try to go into road events. You mentioned like the Canyon Air Road. There are stage races all throughout. So like there's number one, I've heard the Strade Bianche like Fondo version or like amateur version is amazing. And that's a big one on my list. I would love to do that. In addition to that, there's also a lot of them in Austria and in Switzerland and in France. There's these amateur stage races that are 3 to 6 days. There's a lot of different there's a lot of different options that you can pick from. And if you just Google like amateur road stage race Alps, then you'll get a ton of them. And there's like a lot of really, really cool options to race on your road bike. And those would be like, I think where if I was to pick with my heart, that would be the one that I would want to do. When you get into gravel and everything else, I think that finding a course that's engaging is going to be, and like that has a really good ambiance would be good. I think that SBT really does have a very good like hub and like center of the downtown area. I guess they're going back to the original one, which will be good. That's like there's a lot of energy. The expo's great. That's cool. The town though, I felt like maybe it's changed, but I felt like the town did not want me there when I was there at all. So that felt a little uncomfortable. And man, gravel races are just harder for me to recommend. I'm just not as passionate about that. So I think Cape Epic's amazing. I think if you're going to do something in the States, I'm not sure anything is probably harder than Breck Epic. It's got to be one of the hardest weeks on a bike if you're into that. And yeah, I guess that's kind of it. You mentioned Downeyville. It's a really fun event. Yeah, I don't know. I guess that you picked some really good ones. If I was to have a number one, aside from racing in the Alps on my road bike, I would do the Big Little Sugar Double. That like checks off 2 really fun things in an amazing place. So don't at me, all you Mountain West people that hate Bentonville. So, okay. Amanda says, hey, TrainerRoad team, I'd love some guidance specifically around training during perimenopause. I think that it's worth saying that I don't have any experience in this. And Hannah also doesn't have any firsthand experience in this. So can we please keep like a very large salt lick handy for our grain of salt here? And I just want to make sure that's understood. But we are going to attempt to give some guidance on this one. Let's read Amanda's actual context. It says, I'm a female cross-country mountain bike athlete that likes to do 6 to 12-hour races with one 24-hour team race each year. And I also like to do gravel, typically racing 30 to 60 miles. Over the last year, I've been dealing with a lot of classic perimenopause symptoms: sleep disruption, irritability, mood swings, energy crashes, increased fatigue, and sometimes feeling like I hit a wall halfway into a ride, even when my fitness should be higher. I'm currently working with my doctor on the hormonal side, but I'm struggling with how to adjust my training so that I can continue to build strength and durability without digging myself into a recovery hole. My main goals are to improve overall durability on long rides, feel stronger and more consistent across the whole effort, and they mention parenthetically, not falling apart mid-race, recovering better between hard workouts and big ride weeks, and maintaining or increasing my FTP without worsening fatigue or burnout. What training adjustments do you recommend for women in perimenopause who want to continue progressing? Things like intensity distribution, rest timing, fueling strategies, strength work, or modifications to polarized versus sweet spot versus threshold training would be super helpful. Thanks so much. I appreciate any insight you can offer. I do want to point out before we go any bit, and sorry if this feels pedantic, but polarized is not at odds or considered like sweet spot and you say polarized versus sweet spot and threshold training. Those 3 things are not the same. That's kind of like saying like comparing like a car, a pair of shoes, and a sweatshirt. Although they have been branded like as being opposites, like sweet spot or threshold training is opposite to polarized, but polarized just typically doesn't have much sweet spot, if any at all. And instead, it's just going to have threshold work within there. So I think that what they mean is polarized versus pyramidal. With that said, I want to add a preface to this. I want like this advice that we give here to apply to any athlete that's aiming to progress while you're dealing with like a higher than normal amount of life stress, inconsistent sleep, changing recovery patterns, any of that. Now, I want to say that this advice applies to everybody, but we need to recognize the fact that these challenges are going to be particularly felt and particularly difficult for athletes during perimenopause, like athletes in this scenario. So I don't mean to say that they are the same situations, circumstances, or conditions. They are not. I just hope the principles can apply to other athletes. So then if you're listening to this and you are not going to be an athlete that will ever encounter perimenopause, you can still get a lot of value from this as well. And I do want to add like kind of like one very big important principle with this whole thing is the ability to separate signal from noise. This is really important. This is very hard to do in normal circumstances. In other words, figuring out like what is actually making me faster or what is actually impeding my training and not allowing me to train more. It's always really hard. It's much more so though when your body is undergoing like this process like perimenopause when, at any point you wake up one day to the next day and you're going to have a different experience in terms of your body's ability to perform and recover and adapt. So with that in mind, I do want to say that tracking and stabilizing the controllables and identifying doing that will help you identify the uncontrollables. But that doesn't look like bringing in every fitness tracker that you can. Instead, it probably looks like just being very consistent with habits that you do throughout your life. And if you do that, that will probably help in this case. But Hannah, we have this athlete that their goals, they want to improve overall durability on longer rides, feel stronger, more consistent across the whole effort, recover better between hard workouts and big rides, and maintain or increase FTP without worsening fatigue or burnout. And they're asking for specific guidance. They're talking about intensity distribution, rest timing, fuel strategies, strength work, or modifications to their training in any way. What thoughts do you have, and where do you want to start with this one? I know both of us have a lot of notes down.
Yeah, a lot of opportunity here. Let's start with, the first thing I thought of when I read this question was, let's just start with strength training. I know we said that this would apply to all athletes, and it certainly does, but this to me is especially true for a perimenopausal athlete. Strength training is critical. It's even more critical in this period of your life. You have lower and less predictable estrogen, and so it's going to be harder for you to build and maintain muscle mass, but it's more important than ever. Women after the age of 40, without intervention, so without the intervention of doing strength training, typically lose about 1% of muscle mass per year. So if you extrapolate, over a decade, that's 10%. From 40 to 50, you could lose 10% of your strength. And so it's really important that you're supplementing your riding with strength training, not to mention things like bone density. Cycling is not a weight-bearing sport. And so you do need to get into the gym, load your bones, prevent things like osteoporosis. It's going to help your quality of life as well as your work on the bike. But I just think overall, strength training is going to be huge because that is going to directly translate also to fatigue resistance, to your comfort on the bike, to your consistency on the bike. I just think this is one of the best things you can do for your training overall.
Yeah, this is super good advice. And the one thing that it can kind of do is also serve as a consistent measuring stick for you. The goal with strength training isn't to go out there and just, put up 1 rep max and then like increase that every day. Instead, you can have like a strength routine that you follow. And when you follow through on this strength routine with consistency, that can be a good measuring stick for how you're feeling going into your consequential workouts on the bike. And that consistent input then will let you make decisions in maybe a bit more of an educated way. So there's that aspect of this too, in addition to the points that Hannah just made there. What about the recovery side? Because I actually think that when they talk about maintaining fitness and increasing FTP, that's their goal. And then they also say like, I want to be able to recover between workouts. I almost think that that's where the focus really needs to be, because that's going to allow all the other good things to happen is the recovery between workouts. That's really hard though, because recovery and adaptation, it's largely a hormonally driven process, and these hormones are unpredictable at this time.
Yeah.
What do you think on some
Yeah.
advice we can give there?
Lower progesterone and higher cortisol are not the cocktail for optimized recovery for sure. And so, in this time in your life, you really need to pick up the slack that your hormones are, creating difficulty for you. You have to really emphasize it. But I think we can all learn from this. We started this episode by talking about the need for more recovery. I think as athletes, many of us type A athletes, more. I think it's sort of a double-edged sword, probably also during this time in your life. You're going through perimenopause. You might be seeing a dip in some of your numbers, a dip in your performance, and you're thinking, I have to push harder to get more. But it's actually the opposite. Now is the time, and always is the time where we emphasize quality over quantity. And so for this athlete in particular, I would emphasize a polarized training model. And by that, I mean, when you feel good, when it's a day where you're like, I'm feeling great, things are aligning, that's the day to dig in, push hard, go for it. But then you need to allow yourself lots of space to recover. You need to give yourself the time. You're needing to recover more than you typically would so that you can go deep again.
It's a great suggestion. I think that also just reducing to 2 days of intensity per week and allowing yourself the flexibility to move those days across the calendar if you need would be much easier to manage for this athlete. To know that, hey, I have to be able to perform at a high level 2 days per week. Or I shouldn't say perform at a high level. I'm going to have challenging workouts 2 days per week. And instead of 3, really makes it a lot easier to be able to manage your training, be consistent. The one caution that I would have is that many times we think that if we're going to drop down, and under normal circumstances, yes, this is true, that if we're going to drop from 3 days of intensity per week to 2 days of intensity per week, that means we need to increase the endurance volume that we have in order to equate the amount of aerobic benefit that we would get. And I do want to caution this athlete against pushing into a wall with their training and trying to do too much. And I think what the mistake that I see a lot of athletes do when they go to a polarized framework is they think, all right, instead of doing my 60 to 90 minute rides, they need to be 2 to 3 hours. And then on the weekends, I need to do 6 hours, I need to do 8 hours, I need to do these massive rides. And all of that, because it isn't high intensity, operates under the guise of, it's fine. It won't be difficult for me. My body can handle it. But it's a lot of strain. It's a lot of training stress dose that you're giving your body. So in this case, I would agree that it's good to polarize your training with like a lowercase p, I guess, instead of the capital P, uppercase P. If you polarize your training, minimize yourself to 2 days per week, and then allow your other endurance days to be much more flexible so that you might be able to, on a certain day, if you feel good, you can, instead of doing a normal endurance workout, maybe you throw in a tempo workout or even like a low sweet spot workout or something. But you really just have 2 days that are going to be threshold or VO2, where those are going to be the harder ones. So I think that's a really good suggestion. I also think this is something that we've noticed from the data. There's kind of like 2 different athletes here. And we really want to like research this more, but some athletes do much better when the higher intensity work is at the beginning of their week. And this makes a lot of logical sense because as you go throughout the week, and let's just say you're training 6 days a week, when you have Monday off, you're most fresh on Tuesday. So it makes sense to challenge yourself with hard work on Tuesday, because then by the time you get to Friday or Saturday, you wouldn't be as capable of hitting as high of numbers or holding numbers for as long because of fatigue that had accumulated since training all the way from Tuesday. And so this might be a consideration for you is if you've noticed that trend or you don't know where that trend is, experiment with that and put your higher intensity workout first in the beginning of the week, and then just make sure that you space out your high intensity days under normal circumstances. However, if you feel like I'm going to make hay while the sun shines, and I feel really great today after training yesterday. You can experiment with that by just dragging and dropping days around on your calendar. But generally speaking, I don't think that perimenopause just completely invalidates basic principles of training adaptations. And generally speaking, it's not going to be the best thing for your training to do hard day and then another hard day. Instead, it's almost always important to have alternating days where it's hard and then something easy or moderate before you go back to something hard. But you can experiment with that. And some athletes, we've seen the opposite, where they do best with their hard work later on in the week, and they seem to struggle with it early in the week. So be willing to move that intensity around. And I think one thing with this, Hannah, is I think it goes without saying that you should not be filling all your available training time with training. If you're doing that, you've like filled up your glass of water so that it's like all the way to the top. And then anytime life throws you a curveball, which this is life in perimenopause, is you get curveballs. And then who knows, like you probably also have other responsibilities in life that might also throw you curveballs on top of this. It would be a shame to not have any flexibility to be able to tolerate more stress because your body is throwing you curveballs or life. So, I would suggest when you do make changes to your training plan, you drop to 2 days of intensity per week, do that sort of thing. I'd also suggest leaning toward the lower side of training volume in general. So that could help. I don't know if you have any thoughts on any of that, Hannah.
Yeah, I just love what you're emphasizing about flexibility and also the need to potentially adjust your schedule to your body's new needs. And this goes for all of us. Like we're always changing and evolving as people. And so sometimes we get so dead set on a certain schedule or routine that we forget that that routine is meant to serve us, not the other way around. And so we need to honor these basic training principles, like you're saying, honor the schedule, stick to the workouts. But there is a lot of room in there to decide what that looks like. And one thing that comes to mind in particular, for an example for this athlete, is if you're having a lot of trouble sleeping, doing your workouts in the evening might not be serving you the best. And so, not everyone has the ability to make adjustments there. But if you're working until, let's say 6 and then getting on the bike at 7 and riding until 8 or 8:30, that's probably not helping your ability to sleep at night. And so maybe doing a shorter workout before work will actually help that sleep quality be better. It's just an example of ways that you can adjust your schedule to meet your current or new needs.
Something with this that you could use within TrainerRoad, if you're using that to govern your training, is the alternates option to be able to. So let's just say that you have a rough night's sleep. And sorry, I jumped in halfway down this thought process off of something you said, Hannah. Say you have a rough night's sleep, but you've already been flexible with the week and you have to get at least one hard workout or your 2 hard workouts a week. Like in order to do it, it's got to happen tomorrow. If you find yourself in that situation, I would advocate for picking something slightly easier on the intensity spectrum, maybe slightly shorter as well. So then you'll never find yourself just like pushing too hard into that wall and getting stuck. So there's an alternates feature that you can use to be able to find workouts that are shorter and easier. And that can really help whenever you have a workout that's scheduled. There's also, I meant to mention this when we were talking about endurance work in particular, Hannah. It's probably really crucial for them to understand that this is for everybody too. When you're doing endurance work, it shouldn't feel hard. It should be easy to moderate. And toward the end of a long endurance ride, if you're at higher endurance levels, it will feel moderate, maybe even trickling up into hard. But that shouldn't be very long. That should be a short duration of a really long endurance ride. That should only be the tail end of it. If you are feeling yourself riding moderate to hard, or even hard, or anything above that, and it's supposed to be an endurance ride, don't do it. You should be guiding your low intensity endurance work, especially an athlete in these circumstances. A lot of it, stick to the power target. And then when it feels like it's getting too hard, drop that power target. drop it down and go easier. That's extremely important, particularly for an athlete that's going to be dealing with like these varying issues. But, one thing we haven't talked about at all, actually, one other thing too, answer your surveys in TrainerRoad when you're done, like honestly and diligently. Just make sure you go through there, fill out the post-workout survey, because that will help the system understand when you need a bit more of a break and when you don't. That's like very crucial.
You're talking about RPE and how it feels to go hard. And I think that one thing that we miss is let the work be the work. Don't let RPE creep up because of other factors that you could change and you should change. So again, an example of that is, people will say like toughness training, right? And maybe in some circumstances this kind of works, but in a lot of the case, it's just silly. We're just making RPE higher for no reason. And again, an example of this, as your body changes, as you have different needs, don't suffer just to suffer. Like if you're on the trainer, you're going to be more sensitive to heat during this phase of your life. Be cooler. Get a bigger fan. Have ice. Have cold fluid. Like really, I love this contrast that sometimes I'll play with in my training. It's like I'm going to treat myself like a little princess in all of these really specific ways that I can so that I just feel totally like pampered. And then that is what's going to allow me to absolutely dig deep and grind when I need to. And I actually feel like it's that contrast that allows us to do what we do. And so I would encourage you to pause and see if there's anything, and this applies to this person who's in this phase of their life, as well as anyone who's getting on the trainer, going out to do their workout, and it just feels so hard. Pause and ask yourself, is it hard because it's supposed to be hard? Or are there things making it harder that I have agency over that I can change? And one of those is also fueling, which is what you're about to talk about.
Yeah, pave the way, increase the likelihood of success. Yes. Everything you should do should increase the likelihood of success of your workout, not make it harder. Really well said. The fueling side goes definitely hand in hand with that. But this is also, the reason that I'm talking in the very beginning about having patterns in your life that you can stick to and identify and control. Nutrition is absolutely one of those. You can at least control the input. And when you can control the input, that will make it so that you can then see the variables stand out from each other. That makes the signal stand out from just a lot of noise. And nutrition is probably like nutrition and sleep are just like exhibits A and B for how to make sure that you're giving yourself the best chance. You can't skimp on carbohydrates. It's probably really challenging because your body not only is going to respond different to types of nutrition, but also there's a lot of social pressure that also exists on women in general. That is unique to the demands that like men face, I think, and particularly in this phase of your life. But I really just want to make sure that you at least feel like you can rely on our license to make sure that you are nourishing yourself. Make sure that you're giving yourself plenty of carbohydrate. Those carbohydrates, you can really kind of like condense them into the 1 to 2 meals prior to harder workouts. And then you can allow it, you don't have to focus so intently on making sure you get a significant amount of carbohydrate, like a lot of it, in other meals. And maybe that makes it a little bit easier for you. But yeah, you have to fuel the work. On days when I felt terrible, there are many times when I get a half hour into the workout or 45 minutes into the workout, and because I started fueling as soon as I started riding, but I had bad feeling before then. I felt really bad in the beginning of the ride, then really good later on. And it was because I just started nourishing myself. So it should just be an assumed thing that when you get on that bike, you start taking in carbohydrate. And when you are trying to take in somewhere around 60 grams, 90 grams, whatever it might be, whatever works best for you. But I would make sure that you're not below 60 grams, and probably somewhere around 90 is probably going to be a bit more beneficial on those hard days in particular. But you have to make sure that you're really consistent with giving your body all the fuel that it needs, because that's also going to be crucial for this hormonal crazy roller coaster that you're going through. If you deprive yourself of nutrition and then you have excess and then it's going back and forth, that's only going to exacerbate the roller coaster effect.
Yeah, I think especially for this athlete, when they say that they're hitting a wall in the during the ride, way before their fitness should, that's a major nutrition red flag for me. And so I think maybe you're thinking that your nutrition is going well. If you are, that tells me that these changes are because of the new phase of your life. If you're not crushing your nutrition already, even more of a reason to focus on it. Generally speaking, like Jonathan is saying, to give you the license to push this is know that in this phase of perimenopause, you are depleting carbs more quickly during exercise, and you do rely on exogenous carbs or like extra carbs more heavily. And so fueling is really actually more important than ever, and it's already one of the most important things for your performance. And so for me, I'm someone who likes rules. They just help me stick to the plan. So for you, I would say general rule of thumb, like no matter where you're at in the day, in the meal plan, whatever it might be, 20 minutes before the ride, you're taking in some sort of carbohydrate snack. And I would make that 20 minutes before the ride, maybe 30 grams of something, like that can be an applesauce, fruit chews. It could be some drink mix or a gel. But like I said, it can also just be some of those easy, simple carbs in a more quote unquote normal type of food. And then I would say when you get on the bike, your fueling starts 20 minutes in. There's less room. These are things that everyone should do, but I think especially in this phase of life, there's just less room for error. And so you need to be really diligent about sticking to this plan and making it a rule for yourself so that it just becomes second nature.
So hopefully this has been really helpful for you, in this case, Amanda, but then also for other athletes listening to this. Chances are a lot of you have a lot of things going on in your life, and training is one of many. And as a result, you need to make sure that you're somehow balancing it all. These are some basic principles that hopefully can guide you through it. I'm going to go into Michael's question. It says, I'm just about to restart training for 2026, and I always find I need to spend a lot of time just getting my pedal stroke back. Are there specific things you suggest we focus on or specific drills we can do in the early portion of the base phase to get things back on track and keep them that way? What do you think, Hannah? What are your thoughts here?
I mean, I think that we are going to probably go into some drills here, and I have some ideas of drills, of activations. But honestly, the first thing that comes to mind is maybe just a little bit of grace for yourself. I don't quite know what, quote, getting your pedal stroke back means. To be honest, like from personal experience, I just hear that as, man, I feel awkward on the bike. And I get it. Getting back after your little break every time, it never feels great. You never get on and are like, oh, I'm flying now. I feel excellent. Like riding a bike can be sort of an awkward experience. You feel a little uncomfortable in the saddle. Your back is stretched out. Like these things we get used to over time. And when we take break and come back, they feel awkward. You feel uncomfortable and you think, oh, I lost it. You didn't lose anything. You just lost that physical awareness or that kinesthetic awareness of your body in space in this position. And it's just time that it takes to get back. And so I would probably argue that spending a lot of time to get your pedal stroke back, it's nothing you're doing wrong. You probably don't even need drills. It's probably literally just accepting and being okay with the fact that, yep, this is how it feels to come back on the bike. And I just got to put in the time and the work. And I feel like for me, every single off season, you come back, you feel awkward. And then it's almost like magic. There's this one day that I'll put in the comments on my ride, this was the one. And that's like, this was when I finally felt normal again. It's all back. Everything clicks. And then you're off to the races.
Yeah. Every time I come back after taking a break, I'm like, okay, I need a new saddle. I need a different frame size. Exactly. I need to totally, it's like
a brand new bike fit,
right.
Everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did my shoes change? Yeah.
You stick with it for a couple weeks and suddenly you're like, oh, okay, yeah, we're back. We're in a good spot. Some pedal stroke drills that I like to do to be able to help myself accelerate that process in particular. Quadrant drills can be helpful, but I don't find them particularly helpful for me. And a quadrant drill is you breaking the pedal stroke up into 4 parts. The first one would be 12 to 3 o'clock. The next one would be 3 to 6. The next one, 6 to 9, and then 9 to 12. When you do these pedal stroke drills, what you're focusing on is applying torque and force in specific phases of that pedal stroke. When you're going from 12 to 3, that looks like that over the top to forward push. That's what's most naturally normal for us to do. When you talk about going from 3 to 6, then that starts to look like where your heel's dropping and you're almost starting to pull backward a little bit, but it's mostly a downward motion with the pedals instead of just a forward mash and down mash. This one's a bit down and back. Logically, then you start scraping and pulling backward from 6 to 9, which is the second least used one. And then when you get from 9 to 12, that's where you're pulling upward and back to the forward, and that's the one where you use it the least naturally. And it does help to break up an interval workout so that for the first minute, you might be focusing on one quadrant. For the second minute, you're focusing on another, and you just cycle through those. And that can help. But for me, the thing that really helps is cadence drills. I make sure that I slow it down first, and I'll go down and do like strength endurance work when I'm doing tempo and sweet spot intervals, particularly when I'm in this base phase. So I'll drop my cadence down to anywhere between like 55 to 65 RPM. 55 is really low and hard to maintain. 65 will feel plenty low for most people, but I'll slow down to 65 RPM and I'll just be looking at my legs. And I'll be like, what are they doing? And in most cases, when it doesn't feel right, they're kind of wobbly. They're all over the place. So then I really start to focus on the mind and body connection. That sounds like spiritual guru stuff. What I'm talking about is my mind firing muscles specifically, the ones I want, and having that connection where I can be like, yes, I feel my glute firing on the right side. That's what I'm trying to figure out. And I'm trying to think of which muscles am I using a little too much. And I'm just observing my legs and changing how I am pedaling to see how it looks. It's so much easier to do when you slow it down. Chances are you'll find you've picked up some bad habits. And then when you've slowed it down, you can adjust them pretty easily. Separately, I also like to polarize my cadence, so to speak, early in the season. And in some cases, I'll do an interval. Last night, I had 5x10, like sweet spot, really like low threshold. And when I had that 5x10, I did 3 of them at low cadence, 2 of them at high cadence. And I really am aiming during the high cadence intervals to try to maintain that same tracking of my legs. They're smooth. I'm trying to be very composed and still on the saddle while I'm letting my legs do it. It's this period of forced inconvenience and forced discomfort outside of what you would elect to do that then allows you to feel more comfortable when you're in your elected state of just cruising along. So cadence drills actually tend to work better than quadrant drills for me. Do you have any other thoughts on things they could do, Hannah?
Yeah, I completely agree. You mostly talked about everything I was going to say because I recommend cadence drills.
Dang it.
As well. I can add 2 things to it. One thing that I would add would be if this is of particular focus for you, you can do single leg drills that can expose dead spots in your pedal stroke because having both your legs pushing and pulling down, we sort of cover up any issues that we have. By unclipping and having just one leg, you become more aware if there's sort of a square edge somewhere in your pedal stroke. So that can be a good thing. I like to do those maybe during warm up or cool down. I don't think that's really a focus point of a workout. But 2 minutes on one leg, 2 minutes on another, some on the other, something like that during warm up or cool down can be a nice way to engage. And then adding to what Jonathan said of noticing in your pedal stroke where you are wobbly, a lot of the times that's an imbalance that you have. And so short of adding strength training and core, which is always beneficial, the very least you can do is add some pre-ride activations. So some examples of that for me, the 2 things that I focus on personally before pre-ride is how I'm engaging my core to support my back specifically. And so with those, the main things I do are bird dogs and dead bugs. That's going to really engage like the transverse abdominis. That's going to support that back and prevent things like back pain. And then the other things that I focus on are the glutes and glute medius specifically, because that's something that'll often quote unquote turn off when we ride. And the glute medius are going to be the reason, if they're not activating, that your knees are coming in towards the frame or where you see some of that wobble. So for those, I'll do clamshells, I'll do fire hydrants, potentially like side leg lifts, and then just generalized glute bridges as well. So all of those things, it takes 3 to 5 minutes. And I think especially in the preseason, it can be really beneficial just to remind your body some of those movement patterns.
Great advice, Hannah. Let's go to the last question from Tara. Or Tara. I apologize, Tara, if I said it incorrectly. I'll just bounce back and forth. Tara or Tara. Christmas is coming, and I would love to pick your brains on what gifts you would recommend. I have a lot of cyclists in my life, so I'd love to get what experiences or things you would want to get or get for your friends so I can get some fresh ideas other than chamois cream and CO2s. Thanks. From Tara or Tara. Hannah, let's break this up into categories like a sub 50, sub 500, sub 1,000. Then if there's something that falls outside of that, that's okay too. What are your gift ideas? Let's go with sub 50 first.
This is so hard. I mean, it really depends who you're shopping for, right? Like if you're shopping for someone you're super close to, like a spouse, or if you're shopping for, some friends or some work buddies, or like maybe you're buying 20 items and you're just giving them away to like your whole group ride. I don't know. So I tried to kind of cover the whole spectrum here, but I guess we can start with the sub $50. So I'll plug one of my sponsors here, and you can get some custom ESI grips. I think this is super fun because you can customize them. And so you're just going to have, like, mine have little smiley faces on the corner. And so this is a way to get someone a gift, but also make it personal to them. If you guys have an inside joke or something they love, I think that's super fun. Something I'm not sponsored by is you could get I like the Almost There saddlebag. That's something that I played with this year because they have really fun colors. And so again, a way to make it personal is get one that matches their bike or their kit or something like that. So like mine's purple so that it matches my whole vibe, kit, bike. I always think it's nice when it shows that you really put some thought into it. And then if you're really lost, just get nutrition. Because that's the thing, it's consumable. So you can never have enough. You always need more. So, sometimes you run into what if someone has their favorite? What if someone already has this? Nutrition is the thing. It doesn't matter if they already have it. They can still use it. I think everyone would be grateful for that. What about you, Jonathan?
It's a good recommendation. Yeah. While you were saying that, I started to think of the pack that I like. I have an Almost There bar bag that I really, really like. And I'm nearly certain it's under $50 as well. Cool company. They make good stuff. I also have a Silka Matone, I think that's how you'd say it, seat pack, and it has a BOA dial on it. Probably overkill, but boy, I sure love it. It's so nice because you just pop it and then you can undo the attachment to your bike, and then you click it and it just goes right back. It's so nice. Really, really nice. As usually Silka stuff is quite fancy and nice. For sub $50, I think the gift that I have used the most over the last 2 years has been a cooler backpack that my wife got me from Amazon. It was under $50 then. I think it's a little over 50, but we also have another, and I'll link to one. We have a no-name brand one too that works well too. But these backpack coolers, if I ever have to drive to a trailhead, or even I've used it running before, we have an area where we have a run, and maybe you have a ride situation like this, but we have a 5K loop, a nature loop. And I've jogged down with the bag and then dropped the bag there. So then I remember one day I was doing it was basically a half marathon, and training would be the total length for the run that I was doing. And I was able to go by and just get cold drinks all the time. But instead of carrying down a big and clumsy cooler, I could just put it on as a backpack. but it's very helpful for feed zones. And anytime you have to drive to a trailhead, drive to a road area to start and finish a ride, you can always have just perfectly cold nutrition. If you have to go and provide feed to somebody in a feed zone, carry the stuff in that backpack. It makes it really easy if you have to hike in or do anything else. I've used it so much. And so it's a really practical gift that I really, really like. I like the engraved grips ideas. Let's go to the sub 500, I guess. That's a kind of a big jump
from
but
50
just this
to 500.
It is. Yeah.
So again, I have kind of
arbitrary.
a range here in the 500. So again,
Yeah.
I'll start by plugging one of my sponsors. So the Coros Dura is the bike computer that I use. It's $250. If you get it on the Competitive Cyclist website, you can also use my code, which is 4Hannah20, for 20% off. But like really, this is an excellent one. It's solar, so it has a huge battery life. I just think, again, it's a great gift idea. It's an upgrade potentially for someone. Another one I sponsor is Usui. They make a whole bunch of packs, all very well under $500. But because there are so many, again, it's a pretty safe gift to get people because you can always use a different style, a different type, a bigger bladder, a smaller bladder. There's different reasons for all different kinds, depending on the type of riding people do, different colors. So again, you can make it personal for this person by choosing a color they would like or a style they would like or a bigger size or whatever it might be. And then going into closer to that $500 number, maybe a little over, depending on what you pick, I would say a bike rack for the car because it lasts so long. I know the 1-Ups are super popular. Again, this one not sponsored. We use the Yakima Hold Up. I think I had that one before I replaced it for like 8 years. So this is a gift that lasts. They're going to be very thankful that they have it and think of you every single time they get to take their bike somewhere.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good one. I think I have the Kuat Sherpa 2.0 rack, and it's not under 500. I know a lot of people love the 1-Up, and I think that you can get it as low as like 390 if you get the lighter one. So, there's some good options there for sure. For the 500 one, I have quite a few options. The Feedback Sports Team Edition Toolkit, I love. It's and that one, I think it's somewhere around like $300. But this toolkit comes with most of the things that you need to do normal bike maintenance, and it's $375 on Amazon right now. I'm looking at it. So, I use it constantly, and I use those tools constantly. And when I need to travel and I need to bring my toolkit, it comes with a really handy carrying case. And they're very high-end tools. That's very good. So that's one for sure.
That's a great one. I love that idea.
Yeah, it's really good. Very useful one. The bib and jersey that I've loved this year is the Velocio Concept bib and jersey that they have. It's like a different fabric than anything that I've felt before. Almost close to a hard shell jacket that's going to be like a technical layer that isn't Gore-Tex for like backcountry skiing. It's weird. It's hard to explain, but somehow they made bib shorts out of that fabric, but it's extra light. They're very cool. They're very good. I like them a lot. Garmin Varia radars. I think that's probably one of the greatest Christmas gifts you can give a cyclist if they don't have one. It makes riding, you just feel naked riding without it. Like I don't want to be on the road without one. And not just Garmin, Wahoo makes one. Lots of brands. I think Lezyne makes one now. There's tons of radars, and they all use the same sort of communication protocol to speak with your bike computer. And then I switched. This thing is barely under $500, which is insane, and it's absurd. But I took a leap of faith. I never liked the Specialized Power because it was shaped a little bit too much like an arc, and it felt like it was kind of cleaving my hips in half and pulling them outward. And then if I went with like a wider than normal saddle width, because I'm almost always a 143, and if I went with the bigger one, which I think is a 155, it was just way too wide for my legs. So there was no Goldilocks scenario there. But one thing that I had found is I'd use the Pro Logo Dimension for years across all my bikes, but they get very firm, it feels like, over time. And I also didn't have perfect hip support on those, but I really liked them, or perfect sit bone support. But that was my favorite saddle. I switched this year to the S-Works, terrible name too, S-Works Power Evo with mirror saddle. But I switched to that one, and I have absolutely loved it. I loved it so much that I had to get two because I had to replace some of my other bikes, and I will never financially recover from this like the Tiger King guy. So, but they are very, very good saddles. Really like them. Let's go for something that's like around like the 1,000, like still under 1,000, but maybe over that 500 mark. I'm going to do another Feedback Sports one, Hannah. The Pro Mechanic HD repair stand. I really want one. I have their other repair stand that isn't like the newest Pro version, and it's very good, and it has lasted for 7 or 8 years, and it functions like it's brand new. So they make really, really good stuff. But their new one has a lot of easier features that make it even better. That's one expensive item that I would recommend. How about you?
For the $1,000 mark, I think you could go, okay, if you want to go practical, I was actually thinking, I can't believe neither of us, given this podcast, recommended a trainer.
Yes.
So you could go for some
Yes,
sort
this
of
is
like
true.
smart
Yep.
trainer that could be very practical and useful. If you want to do something less practical and just really fun that I think people will love, which I always think part of gifts is like, get something you won't get yourself, Normatec boots. I think that, people typically love those. No matter how much they work, they do feel really good. And so I think it's something that, it feels just you're pampering someone, you're giving them the gift that keeps on giving. That's a great one. It's always, to open that up, sit the rest of the day, the rest of Christmas in those bad boys.
Think about it. It's like giving a person a massage without having to give them the massage.
Exactly.
You could just give them
You
the
could
gift
even
of the massage.
include a note that says, like, I no longer have to give you a massage.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. On the trainer front, a cost-effective one, the Kicker Core is like basically the same thing as like the Zwift trainer and a lot of other ones, and it's just fine, and it'll get people by. If you want to go the extra mile, I still think the best feeling one is the Saurus. And personally, I think it feels the most realistic. Like it doesn't feel like you're going through chunky peanut butter. The Tax is better, but it still doesn't feel as smooth as that Saurus. So those are like my smart trainer recommendations. Quite a few people that I know now have the Zwift Ride, the spin bike with it, and they have it on like a Kicker Core. And it's convenient for sure, but I don't think that there's any direct advantage over just having a trainer and your own bike. Experiences on that side, if you're going for something that's going to be like, experiences are usually more expensive. It's like under 500. Getting somebody a gift card for a bike fit with like a real proper system. I know there's always like going to see the old bike fit wizard guy who just, looks at you and just kind of moves things around and it's all perfect. But going to a retool fit is a very different experience. And I really like that because it's much more objective. It uses data to find where you fall outside the bell curves. And then it gives suggestions on what you could do as a result of that. It can give you a printout that gives you ideal dimensions. The sensors can also pick up on imbalances, so then you can put in things like a shim into your shoes. And Retool isn't the only company that does this. I'm sure there are other ones too, but that's the one I've gotten. And that's a really helpful one to have if it's going to be like an experience. And most bike fits are probably going to be like $300 to $500 if it's a Retool setup, I would think. Maybe even more. I don't know. But it's a very helpful one.
Yeah, I think for experiences, sub $500, I recommend like a shuttle, like buying someone up a one-time pass for a shuttle for trails. So if you live in a mountainous area, this would typically be available somewhere like, in the Salt Lake Park City area, we have shuttles to do the crest. If you're in the Moab area, you've got shuttles to the whole enchilada. Like most mountainous areas will have some sort of person that drives a shuttle that you could pay for someone to have one great day. Another one I have to include, because this is what we're doing for my birthday, coming up, is a credit card. We call it a credit card tour. So basically an overnight bike packing trip where you use a credit card so you don't camp, but you stay in a hotel. So buying someone basically a night in a hotel for a overnight bike packing adventure. Another great one is buying someone a gift certificate to a massage. If you're training hard, I think that's always nice. And, if you didn't splurge for the Normatec boots, it's probably needed.
That's a good point. Great point. Yeah. If it's like cost irrelevant, like a more expensive one, my dream is to go on an Ngamba Tours bike trip somewhere and like Mallorca or some amazing location. That's INGAMBA. That'd be amazing. If anybody's ever done one of those, if anybody's from Ngamba is listening to this, let me know. It'd be cool to like, maybe we could even put together like a TrainerRoad one where like people that listen to the podcast or use TrainerRoad can all come on this Ngamba Tours thing where we go ride some amazing place. That'd be cool. BC bike race trip, if you want to give them something like that. And then for gravel riders, it seems like Traka would be kind of like a cool experience, or maybe the Bentonville Little Sugar thing. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that you should really just get somebody a TrainerRoad subscription yourself if you don't have one yet. I'm going to run through some fun things really quick. So this is the cost, like the common expenses of cycling, and I want to compare it and put it in perspective with TrainerRoad. Most athletes with TrainerRoad are going to see a 10-watt FTP increase in the first like 8 weeks. It's not uncommon. In fact, it's more common than not that we see that. And then on top of that, it's using AI to manage your training and take care of all that. But I'm going to put it in context. A month of TrainerRoad is the equivalent of 1.5 burritos. So in terms of which one will make you faster, I know which one will make you more fast. The burritos are good fuel, but not really enough for training to get fast. If you get a carbon water bottle cage, that's the equivalent of over 3 months of TrainerRoad. Or cycling sunglasses, that's the equivalent of 1 year of TrainerRoad. If you get like a mid-range race bike, it's going to be 20 years worth of TrainerRoad. So the cost is insane. The value is insane. If you want to get a TrainerRoad subscription to anybody, just go on to trainerroad.com. We have awesome, real people that you will chat with. We don't have a bot there sitting there waiting to talk to you. Real people. And then you can say, hey, I want to get a subscription for my friend or for somebody. Then we can get everything set up for you and make that whole thing work. If you're listening to this and you are that person and you need to treat yourself and you need to get faster, sign up. Now's the time, especially because when this podcast comes out, you might already know about some great news, or maybe if development is development and things are unpredictable, maybe it still isn't out yet and you're all going to get angry at me. But there's a lot of reason to sign up. It's very exciting. So I am looking forward to having everybody out there getting faster. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Hannah, really appreciate you. Thanks for taking your time. And if you want to follow Hannah, you go put the link down to her Instagram below, and we will talk to you all next week. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.